We're going to be going over the hair, the scalp, the diseases and disorders of the hair and scalp today. I see that one of the first words here, scientific study of hair, its diseases and care, is called trichology, and I got myself in a mite of trouble with a student with that one time. We were talking about the different things, and I know y'all have heard us referred to as beauticians, hairdressers, hairstylists, cosmetologists, and when I went over this, I said you can even be a trichologist because you're studying the hair and its diseases and all that. I forgot about saying it, and we were having a little celebration at the end of the quarter, and she said she was just tired of people. She had went to work in the salon and said, I'm tired of people calling me a beautician. I don't like that phrase at all. And said, cosmetologist, that seems kind of, you know, too much for around here. And said, you told me a T word one time I could be called, but I can't remember what it is. I want you to tell me what it is, and I could not think of it to save my life, what she was talking about. And I finally decided I must have just been messing with her, pulling some type of joke on her. But trichology is actually the scientific study of the hair and its diseases. And in order to understand some of the things that can happen with hair, we want to understand about the hair itself. And some of this is going to be a little repetitious. I realize we've been over some of it. Some of it we've alluded to in conversations such as the zone of keratinization and how it grows and all that. The integument is the outer covering that encloses the entire body. And if you remember the skin being called a system, it was called the integumentary system. Y'all remember that? The integument includes the hair, skin, and nails, and is the largest and fastest growing organ of the human body. Full-grown human hair is divided into two parts, the hair root and the hair shaft. And when people get hair color or relaxers, they come and say they want their roots done. You heard that? One of the companies right now has cashed in on home hair coloring products for roots only. Y'all seen that ad? For roots. Fact of the matter is, we can't do anything with the roots because the hair root is the portion of the hair located below the surface of the scalp. That they want to get done or retouched is actually new growth. But that's street talk, hair roots. The hair shaft is the portion of the hair that projects above the skin. The main structures of the hair root are the follicle, the bulb, the papilla, the erector pili muscle, and sebaceous glands. Just yesterday I had a group I was lecturing on about the papilla. And when anything happens to a hair papilla, either the hair that comes back through that follicle will be weak or malformed, or if that papilla is destroyed, there will be no hair to come out of that follicle again. That's sometimes why you see somebody that's received a deep wound, they got a scar there, and you'll notice there's never any hair because that injury destroyed the papilla. The follicle is the tube-like depression or pocket in the skin or scalp that contains the hair root. Hair follicles are distributed all over the body with the exception of the palms of the hand and the soles of the feet. The follicle grows downward from the epidermis into the dermis, where it surrounds the dermal papilla. It is not uncommon for more than one hair to grow from a single follicle. But if you'll notice sometimes when there is two hairs there and that's where one's pushing the other one out as it grows, it will cause a little pustule or pimple there because one of them is dead and should actually be gone, but it just hadn't left yet. And the other one's trying to push it out, so you get a little sore place. The hair bulb is the lowest area or part of a hair strand. It is the thickened, club-shaped structure that forms the lower part of the hair root. The lower part of the hair bulb fits over and covers the dermal papilla. The dermal papilla is a small cone-shaped elevation that is located at the base of the hair follicle that fits into the hair bulb. The dermal papilla contains the blood and nerve supply that provides the nutrients needed for hair growth. The erector pili is a minute, involuntary muscle fiber in the skin that has been inserted at the base of the follicle. Fear or cold causes it to contract, and the hair seems to stand up straight, resulting in goosebumps. And sometimes if you get real scared, they'll say, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Sebaceous glands are the oil glands of the skin. They're connected to the hair follicles. The sebaceous glands secrete an oily substance called sebum, which lubricates the hair and skin. And we go back often when we think about the sebum in hair. We didn't talk about this so much in skin when we talked about sebaceous glands. But when we talk about it in relation to the hair, the rule used to be every night you brush your hair 100 strokes. Have y'all seen that on movies and TV? Well, that is the best thing that your client can do, or you can do for your hair, especially these people that have dry hair and scalp problems, is to brush that sebum through. Bring it through to the ends, because usually the ends of the hair are going to be a lot drier than that close to the scalp. And there is some good conditioners on the market, but there is nothing to compete with natural sebum from that client. So you might want to recommend that or remember that as you have clients that have dry scalp and hair problems, that they can help some of it simply by brushing and pulling that all the way through the hair shaft. And you need to do that with a bristle brush. And now y'all are learning the difference in brushes. You know, your vent brush and your cushion brush. Your bristle brush does that because it has hair-like fibers in it that helps really to distribute it. Some structures of the hair shaft. The three main layers of the hair shaft are the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla. We do this a lot, don't we? Keep going back to the same thing. The cuticle is the outermost layer of hair. It consists of a single overlapping layer of transparent, scale-like cells that overlap like shingles on a roof, or if you prefer, like scales on a fish's back. They look kind of like, when you see pictures of them, they look kind of like scales on a fish's back. And you know, when we start to clean that fish, we go against those scales and raise them up so we can tear them loose. And of all things, although we don't really want to tear up the cuticle scales, we do the same thing with the hair. We'll push them back in the opposite direction and rough them up and put chemicals on them that raise them and make them stay up. A healthy compact cuticle layer is the hair's primary defense against damage. A lengthwise section of hair shows that although the cuticle scales overlap, each individual cuticle scale is actually attached to the cortex. These overlapping scales makes up the cuticle layer. When viewed in cross-section, the scales can be seen to overlap, but it is important to note that the hair has only one cuticle layer. Just like fish, you know, they have only one layer of scale, so there's not cuticle on top of cuticle. Swelling the hair raises the cuticle layer and opens the space between the scales, which allows liquids to penetrate. If there were more than one cuticle layer and they were stacked on top of each other, nothing would be able to penetrate the hair. Therefore, none of our chemical services would be possible. A healthy cuticle layer protects the hair from penetration and prevents damage to the hair fibers. Oxidation hair colors, permanent waving solutions, and chemical hair relaxers must have an alkaline pH in order to penetrate the cuticle layer and to reach their target within the cortex. Then we have the cortex. It is the middle layer of the hair. It's fibrous protein core formed by elongated cells that contain melanin pigment. About 90% of the total weight of the hair comes from the cortex. Do y'all remember, or was I with another group, when we talk about the cortex provides 30% of the strength, the cuticle provides 30% of the strength of hair? Y'all remember that? Somewhere along the lines. But try to remember that 90% of the total weight of the hair comes from the cortex. The elasticity of the hair and its natural color are the result of unique protein structures located within the cortex. The changes involved in oxidation, hair coloring, wet setting, thermal styling, permanent waving, and chemical hair relaxing all take place within the cortex. Y'all remember that because that's where our bonds are. You remember if we're going to do the shampoo and set or do a style, we're going to break the hydrogen bonds and reform them. If we're going to do a permanent wave, we've got to break the disulfide bonds also and reform them. The medulla is the innermost layer, sometimes referred to as the pith of the hair. It's composed of round cells. It's quite common for very fine and naturally blonde hair to entirely lack a medulla. Generally, only thick, coarse hair contains a medulla. all male beard hair contains a medulla. Beard hair is generally much coarser and not as uniform as hair from the head of the same individual. As far as we're concerned, the medulla is an empty airspace, and it doesn't involve us one way or another. We had a microscope in here up until we remodeled, and something happened to it in the process of everything being moved out. But it was really interesting. You could see the cuticle layer. You couldn't see the actual scales, because we didn't have one quite that strong. You could see the cortex. And we had a time finding a medulla to look at. And oftentimes when we could finally find somebody that had a medulla, we'd chase them down every quarter so different students could see it. But if you got a strand of hair this long, the medulla would not run all the way through that strand of hair. You just have a little dark place and then a space with nothing and a little dark space. So medullas are not even consistent when they're in a hair strand. They may not go all the way through that hair strand. It was very interesting.